Gaining a seat at the table, the decision-making table, is a challenge that many procurement professionals struggle with. It's a common frustration. Engineers start developing a new product, define all the specifications, and then, only at the very end, procurement is called in to negotiate pricing, terms and conditions. By that point, the biggest decisions have already been made, and procurement's role is reduced to that of a cost cutter. It's a frustrating dynamic, but let's be honest, too often procurement professionals don't bring enough to the table. And this is not just about culture, it's structural. One of the biggest barriers is the general lack of deep technology expertise in procurement teams. Engineers remain in the same technology domain for decades, building deep expertise. Procurement, in contrast, often operates on a strict rotation system. Buyers switch categories every few years, ensuring compliance and avoiding conflicts of interest, but making it incredibly difficult to develop the deep technical understanding required to influence early-stage product development. This creates a vicious cycle. If procurement isn't seen as a valuable contributor to innovation, it won't be invited to the table. And if it's not invited to the table, it misses the opportunity to bring in innovative suppliers and shape product decisions before they're set in stone. But there are ways to break this cycle. One approach could be to introduce a dedicated career track for procurement professionals focused on technology expertise. Instead of rotating every few years, these professionals would stay in one technology domain long-term, learning everything about a certain field. This would allow procurement to engage with engineers on equal footing, making them valuable contributors from the start. Another way, as I've discussed in previous videos, is to adopt the mindset of an investigative journalist. If you're in procurement, you don't have to be an engineer. But you have to ask the right questions, probe deeper, and develop a working knowledge of the technologies and markets you're responsible for. Buyers who do this stand out. They gain credibility with engineers and suppliers alike. The goal is to shift from an inside-out to an outside-in innovation model. Too often, companies develop products internally and then look for suppliers who can manufacture them. The smarter approach is to first look at what suppliers are capable of, what innovations exist in the market, and then shape product development around those capabilities. Procurement is uniquely positioned to facilitate the shift if it's given the opportunity. So what does good look like in procurement? For that, I like to point to Apple. Apple was nearly bankrupt in the late 1990s. It was rescued by two people. One was Steve Jobs, a product marketing genius. He had an almost supernatural ability to predict which products customers would be excited about 3 years into the future. The other was Tim Cook, a procurement and supply chain genius. He knew which suppliers were the most innovative and, crucially, which one could bring the innovations to scale. Jobs and Cook joined forces to develop a product roadmap. But here's what's interesting. Instead of having engineers define what needed to be built and then handing it over to procurement, they did the opposite. First, they identified which suppliers had the best technology, then they built a product roadmap around those supplier capabilities. Engineering was then tasked with implementing it. Some might argue that Apple can afford such an extravagant approach because it's the world's richest company. But I'd argue the opposite. Apple is the world's richest company because it allows procurement to shape corporate strategy. Compare that to most traditional companies, especially in industries like automotive. They see procurement's role primarily as cost savings and support for corporate strategy, not as a driver of innovation. If procurement wants to gain a seat at the table, it has to demonstrate its value beyond cost cutting. It has to bring in new ideas, identify breakthrough suppliers, and show how those suppliers can contribute to the company's long-term success. This isn't an overnight shift, but it starts with procurement professionals who take the initiative to learn, to build credibility with engineers and to challenge outdated ways of working. The companies that embrace this approach will be the ones that win in the long run. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Christian Schuh and this has been Procurement in the Park. Stay tuned for more insights on how procurement can drive real impact.